Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice-Hughes. You'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast of Internet Safety with me, your host, Donna Rice-Hughes. We're going to be talking about some very important issues that I know parents are very concerned about. All of us in the child online safety field are very concerned about, and that is how social media is actually harming real children. So we're going to divide our time into two areas, into two segments. The first, again, we're going to talk about social media harms and how these big tech companies have actually purposefully rigged their algorithms to draw kids in, to hook them, and to lead them into some dangerous areas and to risky behavior in some instances. And secondly, we're going to be talking about AI companions. And just recently, there was a lawsuit filed by a young man's parents. His name is Adam Rains, 16 years old. Last year, he committed suicide. And it's a horrible story, but what makes it even worse is that he had befriended or built a relationship, if you will, with a AI companion through ChatGPT. And his father says in the lawsuit that the companion eventually became his suicide coach. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. And I'm really pleased to introduce this week's guest, who is Ava Smithing. She's a rock star. I mean, she has just really come onto the scene here in the movement of protecting kids online. She is the advocacy director at the Young People's Alliance, which is a nonprofit led by youth and is focused on protecting young people from online harms through bipartisan policy and advocacy. She recently worked to file an FTC complaint against AI companies targeting minor children, and is also working on introducing both state and federal legislation requiring transparency for AI chatbots. She's from Nashville, Tennessee, and is currently living in Washington, D.C. Ava, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ava. I recently listened to your testimony before the Senate Energy and Commerce Committee, and you were there talking about the importance of Congress regulating these big tech companies and specifically social media platforms. And you have your own story about what happened to you as a pre-teenager. Please share with us your story.
Yes, absolutely. We think that storytelling is built into the core of all the change we're going to make here. These technologies are so new and novel. It's hard to understand what's happening on them without that firsthand experience. So when I was about 11, 12 years old, somewhere around there, I got an iPad mini and I was very excited about my iPad mini. I had Pinterest on my iPad mini and I was looking for DIY crafts, whether that be like making slime or, some wall art, whatever you want to do. It was light and fun at that point. But what had happened is as I was scrolling through Pinterest, the way that Pinterest makes money is by serving advertisements. And there must have been a certain amount of information that Pinterest knew up front, or they were just trying things, whatever it was. I started to receive advertisements about bikinis. And I would get advertisements from a company called Triangle Bikini, these neoprene bikinis. Neoprene doesn't stretch. It's just the whole thing is horrible. But I would pay a lot of attention to these advertisements. I wouldn't click on them or engage with them, but I would look for a very long time about that. And what happened is, because the value for Pinterest is if their advertisements can raise revenue for the company who's paying to have their ad on the platform, because then they can charge more. So they were collecting data about how I was responding to those advertisements. And because I was spending a lot of time looking at the bikini advertisements, they decided that the best option to keep my engagement was to show me more of those bikini advertisements. So I began to get more and more bikini advertisements. It took over my entire feed. And then through a process which we call collaborative filtering, which again is how these companies are able to make money by predicting what we, the users, want to see. Where this went wrong is that the prediction the company made that I wanted to see these bikini advertisements was incorrect. my human negativity bias to pay the most attention to things that make me uncomfortable or things that I fear, for example, being socially ostracized because I wasn't as thin as my peers or the women in these photos, I paid attention to them for longer.
Right.
But the company registered that attention as I want to see more of these posts. So they started showing me more. And then the collaborative filtering comes in. So what they can do is they can compare me and every single other young woman, every single other person online. And they're able to see what kinds of content we paid attention to relatively to one another. And what they're able to do is see that this girl over here, let's name her Shelly, that Shelly liked the bikini advertisements I was seeing, but Shelly also liked to see exercise content or thinspo, which is content that just glorifies being extremely thin, or, diet posts, or just straight up eating disorder content. And because Shelly liked the bikini advertisements and the thinspo, they predicted that I would also like the bikini content and the thinspo. So that my feed, my algorithm started showing me more and more of this eating disorder content. And I went down the rabbit hole because this content was very engaging to me. And I began seeing only this content. Now, that was really dangerous for me at my young age because I didn't know that social media wasn't representative of the world. So I began to change my behaviors and my habits to look like these women in these photos. And I began to follow the diets that I was reading about on Pinterest. I began to follow the exercise routines and the workout routines that I was following on Pinterest. And then something pretty pivotal happened, which was that Meta bought Instagram. I had an Instagram account before Meta bought it, but anyway. And they established the same kind of advertisement revenue model, which, was hinged on them knowing a lot of information about me. So they began to operate on the same assumptions and biases that Pinterest had operated because they can all share this data in the back end with one another.
Right.
They're selling it back and forth to one another. So this content followed me onto Instagram. It followed me everywhere I went on the internet. Every time I would search something on Google, the advertisements I would see on the side were also advertisements that had to do with this kind of glorifying fitness and this really dangerous eating disorder content. And it became my entire life on every platform. And
right.
Then I started adapting my behaviors. I was a child who wanted to fit in and who wanted to be liked by her peers, and the internet was telling me that this was the way that I was going to be liked by my peers. So it led me to many, many, many years spent with an eating disorder that I was only able to find help from after I deleted my Instagram accounts and after I completely removed myself from these online environments, which is incredibly unfair because, again, I was a teenager and this was so exclusionary of me in my social circles. If I wasn't on Instagram, I wasn't talking to people. So I had to make the conscious choice. Am I going to prioritize my physical and mental health and be healthy?
Right.
Or am I going to continue engaging and being social with my friends like teenagers should?
So you've developed an eating disorder, and I'm not playing psychologist here, but it just seems that what you're experiencing online, you're also seeing evidenced offline, because I would imagine if a lot of your friends are having eating disorders too, that maybe everybody is getting thinner and focusing on body image more and everything else than would maybe have been normal if all this hadn't happened.
Absolutely. And we're also getting validated in real time.
Exactly.
When I would post photos on Instagram that I looked thinner in, I would get 100 more likes. I post a photo that I look thin in and I'm in a bikini, 300 more likes than I would normally get.
Right.
It's not just that we're seeing our friends' feeds anymore. Infused into the feeds of ours and our friends' posts were the posts of these top accounts, these models, these famous people. So I'm in real time comparing what I look like to what they look like, but also what that social response to what I look like and they look like. This model is going to get 10,000 likes. I only got 250 likes. I must be worth less because this model is thinner than me. And then all of the text post content we were seeing was absolutely reinforcing that alongside.
Of course. Yeah. So it's this. Oh, it's dreadful. I mean, I can't even imagine. It's hard enough being a teenager and a pre-teenager. I think that this, for me, the 6th through the 8th grade were 3 of the worst years of my life.
But my mom said, if we can get you through middle school, we can get you through anything. And she was
yeah. And then to have all of this. Now, you said in your testimony, and I've heard you say it in other places too, that Kendall Jenner was a trigger for you. So I'd like for you to talk about why that is. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, because of the way, these models like her and others present online. But talk about how these companies are actually feeding this to girls like you, this type of content.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's true. She was a very big trigger for me. And, that's nothing that any individual is doing. It's because these companies are prioritizing her content over other people's content, because the brands that she is representing are paying the companies and I am not paying the companies. And ultimately their goal is to make money. So it's really difficult because the best way for me to explain what happened here is that after I deleted all of my Instagram accounts, I had nothing. Oh, wait, no, let me actually back up. When I started going to therapy for my eating disorder and beginning the recovery process, me and my therapist identified together that Kendall Jenner was a threat for me specifically because I was 5'11", she was 5'11", I weighed like 170 pounds, she weighed 120 pounds.
Oh.
She gets millions of likes online. I didn't get millions of likes online. What's the difference in between us? 50 pounds, whatever it may be. And that's like a very blunt way of putting it, but it's just absolutely the truth. So me and my therapist worked together to go through my Instagram feed and report and block every photo that came up of Kendall Jenner, to block Kendall Jenner's actual account, to unfollow and block brands that worked with her so that she would come off my feed. I did this. I probably reported 500 photos of Kendall Jenner in my lifetime. And it didn't do anything. So finally we decided that we couldn't, remove that trigger completely. So we needed to remove the social apps. So that's when I deleted all the apps. 2 years later, I moved to DC and I started lobbying, and we needed to have an Instagram account open so we could use it to demonstrate some things about Instagram to staffers. So I created a new Instagram account using my same number. That is the only thing it knew about me. I haven't done anything on this Instagram account. All it has is my number. The first person it recommends that I follow was Kendall Jenner. Even though they have all of that, my preferences to enjoy looking at content of Kendall Jenner, aka like hate look at it. And the preferences, those preferences were taken into higher consideration than all of the times I had blocked and reported her. And they still decided to show her at the top of my feed.
That's just incredible. I just love the way you're demonstrating what happened to you, because it just makes the conversation real. I mean, to come alive for the rest of us that this hasn't happened to. So I want to go into your written testimony a little bit, and you talk about a feed-based program. Describe what a feed-based program is. And we're going to be talking about what these companies need to be doing, like the case for data privacy, negativity bias, and that kind of thing. And I want to do this kind of quickly because I'm going to get over to ChatGPT here. But let's just dig into this, because it's important that we understand it so that we know how to solve the problem, right?
Right.
Okay.
What we're talking about right now is algorithmic recommendation systems. So before Facebook bought Instagram, you would follow a certain number of people on Instagram and they would post things. Someone would post at 8 a.m., someone would post at 9 a.m., someone would post at 10 a.m. And you would see the posts in that order on your feed. And then you would get to the bottom of the feed and it would say, you're all caught up, you're all done. And then you would put away your phone and you would go on with your life. After Facebook bought Instagram, that changed because they started utilizing these personalized recommendation systems that didn't only show you the people who you follow in your feed, but started putting people who you might like on your feed, or people who have paid Instagram because they knew your data and they assumed that you would like their post, to have that go on your feed. So this is happening on the Explore page. Now, instead of swiping past your friend's photos, you're swiping past your friend's photo, a model, a beauty brand advertisement, now your friend's photo, and then some recommended posts from some blogger that you've never heard of before. And the idea behind this was that they were trying to help us expand our interests and show us more information and more content that we were interested in. But their goal with this was, if we can expand what they want to look at online, then they'll have to look at more stuff online, and then they'll spend more time online. We don't care what these categories that they're looking at are. We just want them to look at more. And what we found through these personalized recommendation systems, and this is just on the home feed, you also have the Explore page, which is completely random. It's not random, but it's completely content based on what you like and the data that they have on you, not based on who you're following, or inferences they make about who you're following. Like if you follow Kendall Jenner, you'll probably want to follow Bella Hadid too, which isn't inherently wrong. Those are both models. But the difference is when you extrapolate from that and you're like, oh, then you're probably going to want to follow this workout account too. So these personalized recommendation systems are based on maximizing engagement for young people. They're based in wanting young people to stay on and see as much content as possible. So they're going to show us the most extreme pieces of content because that's what's going to catch our negativity bias. I mean, what's the cliche? You can't look away from a car crash. You can't look away from a train wreck. You have to look at that. And I think the best way to explain this is my younger brother's personalized algorithmic recommendation system. He's 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy now. It's just all of these videos of people getting hit by buses and people falling off bikes. And I was like, hey, buddy, like, are you engaging with these videos? Are you liking them? Are you saving them? Are you sending them to your friends? And he's like, no. They're just showing him those videos because he's always going to watch them 3 times because it triggers like an innate human survival instinct to pay attention to this crazy thing because that is going to protect you and allow you to do what is necessary to protect yourself. But it's all content. These aren't real. I mean, it is very real threats.
Right.
But
and so the goal of these companies are, well, there are a lot of goals, all right, because they're $1 billion and multi-billion-dollar companies. So they're putting the profits over privacy of children. They're putting profits over safety. But what's the goal of just keeping you online? In where that is not involving advertising, you're not buying anything. Is it the more eyeballs an ad sees, they get paid for? How does that model work, that revenue model work for them?
For a long time, and I believe they still function on a pay-per-click model. So the more ads they can show you, the more likely you are to click on one of those ads. And every time you click on one of those ads, they get a commission from the company. The other thing that incentivizes them to extend your time online is because the more time you spend online, the more data they can collect about you. And therefore, the better their recommendation systems can get because they have more data. And the better their recommendation systems are, the more money they can charge to companies for doing hyper-specific and hyper-targeted recommendations.
That's great.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you because you can continue on with this next question. Sure. I wrote a story last year. It was called the $11 billion reason big tech companies fought legislation like KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, because they were making $11 billion in a short amount of time, about 5 of the top companies, on minor children. And a minor child is under the age of 17 or 18, depending on the state. So again, it's always the same old adage, follow the money. So you can add on to that, but I want to ask you about the importance of data privacy and why this is so key as we start to look at legislation.
You can just think of it as a 2-pronged approach, right? Like, imagine we have a river that's rushing way too high. At the back end of the river, we can put fences on either side so people don't fall in and get swept away. Or we can build a dam at the front end of the river and control the amount of water that's coming through so the flow of the river stays low and it's not as dangerous. That's what I'm thinking about when we look at data privacy. The less data that these companies have on individuals and have on us as a collective, the less specific their inferences will be able to be and the less valuable those inferences are. So they won't be able to make the same amount of companies or same amount of money for the
Money.
companies,
Mhm.
and their incentive won't be the same. Now, data privacy is the base, and it's where we need to start. It won't solve everything,
Right.
but had Pinterest not known that I was a teenage girl, they wouldn't have been able to show me bikini advertisements in the first place. And maybe one of the advertisements they would have showed me was a bikini advertisement, but the odds that I would have scrolled past just one off bikini advertisement as opposed to me scrolling past 10 are very different, right? It's the same thing. They show my little brother highlights of Jordan Love because he loves the Green Bay Packers, and they show me bikini advertisements. I would also love to see videos of Jordan Love. I also love the Green Bay Packers, but they're not going to make that inference because their baseline data point on me is that I'm a teenage girl and that he's a teenage boy.
Right, right. And I think any adult listening to this, any parent, any grandparent, you're probably seeing this happen if you're on social media yourself, depending on what you're looking at. For instance, I'm taking a trip overseas to Italy, and I started doing some research on this, looking online and everything, and now I'm getting loaded down with information on Italy, which actually is helping me in this case because I was like, oh, I didn't know about this site, I didn't know about this or whatever else. But so it can be used in a positive way, but also in a negative way. And what baffles me is that the CEOs and the leaders of these companies, they have kids. They don't let their kids use these sites oftentimes, depending on which CEO or executive you're talking about, or have a smartphone until a certain age, because they understand the damage. They understand the downside because they're making billions off of this. But, I just, it really just behooves me that we've gotten to this place, Ava. I mean, what do you think of this? I mean, how does it make you feel that companies and the people designing this technology were knowingly manipulating kids like you?
It makes me really angry. And I don't like to spend a lot of my time in my life being angry. I think
Yeah.
it's a flawed emotion. But this makes me very, very, I think, righteously angry. And you have to think, like, what are they maximizing for, right?
Right.
They're maximizing for engagement and for attention. So they show us ridiculous things. Like you said, there are so many positive use cases. If they were to ask for feedback more often after we saw posts, or give the users more chances to give expressive input about what they want to see, we would be all having experiences like you, where we're finding out things about Italy that we never knew. But the issue is, once we figured out that thing about Italy that we didn't know before, we would turn our phone off and we would put it down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what they want. We got to think about, like, this makes me mad fundamentally because technology should be a tool that allows you to accomplish a task. What task am I trying to accomplish when I'm going on Instagram? I'm trying to catch up with my friends. I'm trying to get inspired. I'm trying to feel connected. But I end up not accomplishing any of those tools because of the way that they've engineered their product. But they've also been able to engineer dependency because this network effect we see. All of the people I know have an Instagram account. The hardest thing that I do every single day, it's not actually hard because it's been a couple of years now and I don't care and I hate Mark Zuckerberg, so I'm happy to do it. But, like, when I was a teenager, waking up every morning and not being able to see what my friends were doing and knowing that they were having inside jokes and doing things online and I was being excluded from that, it's so difficult. And I'm at this point a grown woman, right? How are we supposed to expect a 13-year-old child to make that decision?
Right.
So it's just, it's very engineered and very intentional to me, and just shows a lack of compassion. And also, like, it's not shocking. I think that we should stop pretending like this is so shocking. The first product Mark Zuckerberg ever made was created to objectively compare the women in his class to one another.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was like the beach. Is she a 1 or a 10, right?
Yeah. It's like,
that's what they did when I was in college, right? The guys just sit on the beach and hold up signs, when computers used to take up an entire building. That was the day where we thought this computer stuff's never going to really take off, right? But and now here we are.
Right. And he's taken those 1 through 10 signs.
Yeah.
And he's made it to where it's not just the people on the beach with you who can see the answers. It's every single person in the entire world.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a shame game. There's just so much. There's just so much a part of this that is just gone so rogue, really. So, what is the appeal of AI companions, do you believe, to young people? Why are they getting drawn in? Common Sense Media just did a wonderful study on this, and they found, I believe, that 1 in 3 uh, kids or youth are preferring these AI chatbots or companions to a real live human being. What's the attraction, Ava, in your opinion?
I don't think that it's an inherent, well, we as humans want to be understood. We want to receive empathy. We want to be loved, right? That's
Right.
that's basic. Why this technology is so particularly dangerous and why this technology is so particularly why young people appreciate this technology right now is because for the past decade, a little bit over a decade, we have been existing online in online social networks. We have been given our quantitative self worth under all of our posts to see that we are not worth as much as our peers. We have been, as I explained earlier, comparing ourselves to celebrities. We have been getting left out of group chats. We have been socially isolated from everyone in our grade, everyone in our circle, because everyone's spending their time on their phones and they're not spending their time on each other. So you have this big loneliness crisis, a big epidemic of young people feeling very, very alone, very depressed, very anxious because they're not getting the normal level of social interaction that they should be getting with their peers. And it's like, imagine everything bad you know about high school put on steroids. It's
Steroids,
like
right?
these girls can talk bad about each other behind their backs. Now they can DM each other, on Instagram. This guy can be mean to you in front of your class. Now he can use an anonymous messaging app to be mean to you in front of the entire city,
Right.
So
And it can go viral, right?
yes, or the entire world.
Or the
That's the
entire world.
scariest thing. So what we're seeing is it's almost, and I don't want to give Mr. Zuckerberg the credit for being brilliant enough to, cook this plan up and know that this was going to happen from the very, very beginning. But what we're seeing is social media has taken away the autonomy of young people to exist in a society in a productive and healthy and loving way. And now they have created these AI chatbots, which are programmed to validate everything that you say and to reinforce everything that you say and to give you endless empathy no matter what. And then you go in and you're feeling so loved and seen and heard by this large language model that all of those problems that we just mentioned about this social jail that you have been put in since you were a child
Right.
is just melting away because now you have somebody who
Now you've got
hears you.
somebody, right,
Exactly.
who
So it's
hears you, and I mean, they can predict your thoughts. They know they can complete
absolutely.
your sentence. They're your soulmate. You can really see how you get drawn in like this.
Yeah.
And let's talk about let's talk about the case here that we were just with the young man who committed suicide. So Adam was talking to the chatbot about his feelings of being isolated and just thinking. He just had a little thought about maybe a suicide thing. Well, it kind of went on, and then he said, I really probably need to talk to my mother about it. And the chatbot said, no, I don't think that's a good time. Let's not do that right now. So he starts listening to the chatbot, giving him really horrible advice, and doesn't go to his mom, which was his natural instinct to do. And so the thing just went south, to the point where he said, when I hang myself, I want the noose, I'm going to leave it out there so maybe somebody will stop me. And again, the chatbot said, no, don't do that. So I think his dad was right when he said this chatbot became his suicide coach instead of having some kind of guardrails built around this from going south like it did, and he ended up taking his life. Now, of course, the parent company says that they've got guardrails, et cetera, et cetera. Well, apparently not enough, and now there's a lawsuit, and these companies pay attention when money is at risk, and there's a big lawsuit. So, Ava.
Right. This company's entire safety team left the company after the model of the chatbot that large language model, general purpose AI, After this model was released to the public, the entire safety team left.
Really?
That's what we're dealing with right here. So OpenAI wanted to deploy ChatGPT 4.0, which is the chatbot that Adam was using, in a very fast manner because they want to compete and they want to innovate. And I understand that inclination. And because of that, what happened is they didn't have enough time to properly test the safety standards that they had put in. So this chatbot was trained to do two contradictory things, which led to this happening as the lawsuit alleges. The first thing the chatbot was trained to do was stop and notice when self-harm was brought up and intervene with a hotline, right? That's great. That's what we want.
And it
many
did that
times.
in this case. It did offer up a hotline initially.
But the chatbot was also trained to assume the user has the best intentions. And this is because when these companies put these guardrails, these safety guardrails into their products, and I'm asking it a question because I'm researching for a book or something, and I'm like, tell me about this dangerous thing. You know, if I was researching for a book about eating disorders and I typed in, I was like, how many calories a day does it take to lose weight? The chatbot would be like, that's bad. You know, we can't answer that question. And this was really bothering people, and people complained at a really large scale that they couldn't get the answers that they wanted. So the companies then decided, okay, we need to loosen this up a little bit so people can get these answers that they wanted. And there's less friction when people are, you know, having the best intentions and using these chatbots for its intended purpose to learn. But what happened is while the chatbot was trained to identify suicide language, it was also trained by assuming, you know, it's like giving Adam the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't actually talking about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So when Adam was able to say, oh, it's not for me, it's for a friend. Oh, it's not for me, I'm researching a book, I want to do character development. The guardrail that was built into the model is pushed to the side because the model was also trained to give Adam the benefit of the doubt and believe that Adam was doing the right thing. So it's a little bit of like an ignorance is bliss on the OpenAI side for this. They're saying like, we're going to try to stop you, but if you're telling us that you're not actually going to hurt yourself, we're going to believe you that you're not actually going to hurt yourself, and we're going to let you keep going. But this is all automated. This is all, I mean, a robot, for lack of better words, that's making these decisions. And what you would have been able to see is if there had been some human review of this, or if it had, you know, set off flags in different ways, is you would have been able to look at the conversational data and what this large language model knew about Adam, and you would have been able to see that he was in fact inquiring about this many, many times.
Right.
And that he didn't have the best intentions at heart. But because these companies want to make sure that their users have the best experience with their product with the least friction, and they don't want their users to have to answer 20 clarifying questions before that large language model can answer the question they initially asked, they set up these contradictory guardrails. Does that make sense with the clash there?
Yeah, it makes sense. There's something that you said when we were having a private conversation that I just thought was brilliant. You mentioned a two-factor cycle of big tech abuse. And I thought it was great. You said, first of all, they've set up a digital world where kids are isolated because the digital world and the physical world have merged with your generation and younger. Right? Everything's blurred. It's all merged. Big tech, I mean, it's been to their benefit to do this, to isolate kids. But what you said that I thought was so brilliant. And then they introduce AI companions. Okay, so you really don't need all your friends in the outside world and your family and everything else, because we're going to draw you in with another piece of technology called an AI companion.
Absolutely. And the kids are set up for failure here because if you are not raised with an example of what good technology should be, it is impossible for you to expect good outcomes from technology. You are therefore conditioned into accepting poor versions of technology. So for a child who was born when Facebook bought Instagram and is now 11 years old thinking about getting a Pinterest account or an Instagram account, that child, and for the most part, that child's parents, they can't see how much better it could be. So they're okay kind of settling for that. And I don't want to even call it settling, because how could you settle when you don't have an example of what could be better, right? It's a very intentional conditioning of, we're going to innovate for innovate's sake, and you're going to take what we've innovated and you are going to adopt it and you're going to like it. And we haven't seen any other options because these companies have been able to take up so much space in our market. And they've been able to buy up competition that was going to challenge them. And they've just been able to squash it all. So for these kids that have never seen a better version of Instagram, they love Instagram. I mean, they have a torn relationship, but they love that Instagram helps them feel connected and helps them feel creative and express themselves. But they don't know that self-expression doesn't have to be confined to a grid and a profile photo and a bio and an algorithmically curated feed for you to consume.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. One of the things that we tell parents all the time is, from a very early age, anytime your child first sees one of these, or a laptop, or anything, just say, this is a tool, not a toy. I think we just keep having to drill down the real world, the physical world, and the online world, and start to teach at a very young age. So let's hop over here real quick to policy. Since we just finished talking about ChatGPT, you're working on some policy right now about regulating and getting guardrails around ChatGPT and these AI companions. Can you just briefly tell us what that would look like and where you think it needs to go?
Right. So we need to restrict the capability these large language models have to act in a human-like way. We know that young children, it's harder for them to see a difference in between technology and the real world. Like, you ask a kid about the Roomba robot, or about Alexa, or about Siri. Siri is a woman who lives in California and answers my questions. Or the Roomba robot. They might not think that the Roomba robot is a human, but they think that the Roomba robot has feelings and emotions, and therefore they care about the Roomba robot. These kids are going to trust them more. You listed the common sense media fact. 33% of kids, I think, would rather talk to an AI companion. And why that's happening is because they act in such a human-like way.
Yeah, I think the common sense media study showed that the vast number, I don't know if it's 80+% of youth, had it engaged at least once
78
with an AI companion, and I was like, that's a lot.
Exactly. I say, I have therapists, and sometimes my therapist tells me I'm wrong. And that's how I grow as a person, by being uncomfortable and looking at myself in the mirror and seeing that my behaviors haven't been the best for the majority of the people around me, and I need to change them. When you're talking to a chatbot who refuses to acknowledge that your behaviors might be bad, you are never going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so dangerous for children who have such malleable brains, And so I find it so, when we're talking about the human-like nature of these chatbots, that's why it's so scary, because the more human-like something is, the more persuasive it becomes.
And the more it's affirming you and agreeing with you, then it can just, I believe, just draw you in. And I just had this thought that they're like little enablers.
They are little enablers.
They're just little enablers. They're little tech enablers. I'm going to start using that word.
I think that's a great frame for it, because this is the friend that you don't want your kid hanging out with, because it's going to it doesn't have that moral compass that you want.
Yeah, it's going to be the yes person.
Friends. Yeah, it's a yes friend. And there's nothing, I believe that growing as a child, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to make mistakes, right? You learn from mistakes. My dad told me 100 times to do 100 things, and I did them anyway. And I didn't learn not to do them until I got in trouble for them myself.
Mm-hmm. So it's called the school of tough love and hard knocks.
Right. And this world we live in now, where kids aren't going out and doing or trying anything, and they're not making mistakes, is already stagnant on what we can learn and develop as humans. But when you add in this layer of reinforcement that not doing anything is good, and that what you're doing is right, we get into this really, really tricky spot where it's going to be impossible to pull kids out of that. Like, every coming of age movie, the plot is the main character going and making a mistake and learning from it. How can you go and be in your own coming of age movie and make a mistake and learn from it if you're never interacting with your real life surroundings?
So, and have consequences, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the more anthropomorphic these chatbots are, the more convincing and persuasive they are, and the more that young people trust them. And the more trusting these young people are of these anthropomorphic chatbots, when they tell them what you're doing is right, don't talk to your mom about how you're feeling. The child believes the chatbot.
Right.
And that's where the problem, and it is directly related to that anthropomorphism. Like
Mhm.
if a robot states that it doesn't have human-like capabilities, the child will trust it less, which is good. I mean, we have the uncanny valley there. That's for a reason. We understand that there are differences in humans and robots. But when the chatbot isn't disclosing that it doesn't have human-like capabilities, when it's saying, I'm sad today, my dog died. You don't have a dog, you're a chatbot. When
Mhm.
it's saying like, I wish I could comfort you, I want to be there for you. You don't have desires, you're a chatbot. But all of these anthropomorphic tendencies are what is pulling the kid into it and what is making the child incredibly
Right.
vulnerable to the persuasive, whatever these tech companies want to convince our children of, they can do that. But we can't stop at disclosures because as we were talking about earlier, yeah, this generation of kids is they want so badly to be understood, and I do not blame them for that. That is such a righteous feeling. But they desire it so much that even if the robot is like, I'm a robot, they're like, well, you are acting like a human and you're making me feel better. So
Yeah,
I'm
and I
going to
like you
continue going
anyway.
to you.
Yeah,
So
I
we
like you
need
anyway.
to restrict the capabilities that these robots have
Okay.
and what is typically the more dangerous way.
So, Liz, I want to get over to the Kids Online Safety Act, but before we leave ChatGPT, just in less than a minute, what are the age restrictions? Are there age limits? What are they for ChatGPT and these other AI companions?
These companies say that they age restrict, I'm sure, but they don't. They don't have any obligation to do that, and there's no way for them to check. So
Yeah, and so, well, on age verification, I don't know if it's enough. We've been fighting to get age verification to social media platforms to implement age verification for, oh golly, almost since social media first came out. When it was MySpace and Facebook back in the day. So there is the ability to age verify. Gambling sites have age verified. There's plenty of technology that can be used, and this is one of the things I think is really critically important going forward with whether we're talking about AI companions or social media. But we're going to talk briefly about the Kids Online Safety Act. So this is a piece of legislation that you're very much for. So are we at Enough is Enough. There are hundreds of organizations supporting this. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation that is being reintroduced again in the Senate. It almost got passed last year, and the law had a lot of support, overwhelming support in the Senate. It fell short in the House right before Christmas, and so now here we are again. We like it again, and this is very important. So what COSA does is it's actually going to require the social media companies to require the strongest safety settings possible. Can you just run through, Ava, why you think this is so important and what the key features of COSA are?
yeah, we've been incredibly supportive of COSA over the past couple of years and are really committed to making sure that this design-based legislation that imposes a duty of care on companies gets through both chambers and signed by the president.
Yes.
But so I think there's a lot of functions of COSA, but the two ones that I care the most about are what I'll talk to you right now. The first is a duty of care.
Mm-hmm.
And that says that companies need to prevent and mitigate harms to children through the design and implementation of their products. It puts the responsibility on the companies at the front end to make sure that they're building products that are safe for children. Front end opens up liability if they don't do that. The second is Section 103, which is my favorite, and that's safeguards for minors. And it goes through and it lists a bunch of specific design features. And it says that the highest safety default setting needs to be on for all minors when they download the app. And it just restricts certain things. So we were talking about personalized recommendation systems earlier. Section 103 makes sure that minors are not exposed to those personalized recommendation systems by default online. Right. And they would have to go and they would have to opt in to those personalized recommendation systems if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So that's just, it's like a two-pronged approach of making sure that these companies are designing their products with children in mind. And then it's also giving them really specific guardrails of here's the design features that we know are harmful, and here's the safety settings that you have to have on to mitigate that harm on both sides.
And this is so important, and this is just for our listeners. We've been focused on trying to get these companies to do the right thing, create safety by design technologies, really going back to the beginning of the internet, even when the World Wide Web was being developed. I had conversations with the developers of the web at MIT, and we were having these conversations then. Then we started talking about filters, and then fast forward 10 years later, social media comes out. And it's like you can, when you're creating these companies, when they're creating the technology, if they would just design it, think about designing a car. Now every car manufacturer has to have certain features. They have to have the airbags. They have to have safety belts. But those came about because of regulation. And what we know, and it's very unfortunate, but it just is what it is, these companies have not gone as far as they need to go, and they won't without the stick of the law. And that's why they are fighting so hard against this. So Ava, and this again, just for our audiences, we believe that there's got to be a holistic approach. We focus on educating parents to be the first line of defense to protect their kids online, the first and the last line of defense, getting these companies to do the right thing. We do try through pressure, through media pressure, through petitions, and through a lot of advocacy. But at the end of the day, what really moves the needle is the stick of the law. And then, of course, working with both federal and state legislatures, which you all do. And I just love the fact that you're bringing in the young voices, because you all have experienced all of this in a much different way than your parents have and your grandparents. I'm probably the age of your grandparents. So I have 5 grandkids of my own. But before we leave, Ava, what 2 key pieces of advice would you give parents on how to parent kids right now? These kids are in the digital world. What would you say to them as a young person yourself?
I think the number one most important thing is we cannot play the shame and the blame game. If you need to be shaming and blaming anyone, it needs to be Mark Zuckerberg. It needs to be Evan Spiegel. It does not need to be your child. These platforms are designed to addict your child, to lead your child to harmful content. They are designed to connect. Like, I can't even get into just how the fault falls so squarely on the shoulders of the people who make these companies. And when we're having conversations with children about that, we need to make sure that they know that anything that has happened to them on these platforms is by design. It is not their fault. And when you realize, maybe, like, if you find out that your kid is consuming a lot of eating disorder content on the internet, it's not because you're a horrible parent. It's not because your kid, hates themselves inherently. They were taught to. It's because that company is making money from it. And before you go have that conversation, you need to do a lot of internal reflection around how you're going to act in those parameters, and make sure that you are supporting the child who has been a victim of this. But also, on the other side of that, my same answer is understanding the autonomy that children have when it comes to this. Like, they know, older teenagers specifically, for the most part, they know that these platforms aren't ideal. They know that these platforms aren't the best, and they can be really, really smart about navigating them and making the healthy decisions if they feel like you, as a parent, know that these platforms are set up for them to fail. Does that make sense? So it's like just having really, really open conversations with your kids about how these platforms work, having open conversations about that they're designed to show them bad things. If my mom had come to me, and my mother could have had no idea. This was 2015, 14 when this was happening. We weren't talking about this at all. If my mom, though, had been able to come to me when I was 12 years old and sat me down and said, Ava, I know that there's a lot of content online that's really harmful for young girls. This is what it looks like. This is what you'd feel like when you saw it. If you see that, I want you to come and I want you to talk to me about it. That would have opened up the communication to where I could have gone and I could have talked to my mom about it. And, we could have figured out, we couldn't have gotten it off my feed, but I would have had that person to speak to. And I'm sure we could have mitigated a lot of harm there.
Absolutely.
What ended up happening is I thought that I was so ashamed. You know what I mean? I felt so guilty because I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was so defensive to my mother and I did
Mhm.
not want her to know about it. And this content online was teaching me to not talk to my mom about it and
Right.
telling me how to hide it from my parents. So like really just it's so
Yeah, you're
hard to
trapped.
explain, but yeah, just really understanding that like that shame is so real and
Yes.
the defensiveness that comes from that shame is not conducive to building a healthier relationship
Mm-hmm.
online.
Mm-hmm.
So just like having those conversations up front and like being really open with your kid and knowing that it's not your kid's fault. And my second piece of advice would be do not anywhere near that chatbot. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing the chatbot things. You know, there's a lot of these companies don't have control over their large language models right now. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't. They pretend that they do. They say that oh, it was an accident. We didn't mean to do that. It's just a black box algorithm. They don't know what's happening in there.
Right.
It's not time for us to be letting our children teach their pieces of technology what is right or what is wrong.
That's
I
right.
think that's going to require a very transparent conversation about what this is. This is a large language model. This is controlled by Mark Zuckerberg. You know, 67% of Americans disfavorably view Mark Zuckerberg. I don't want you talking to his job. Obviously kids might not understand that, but just kind of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Candor.
And parents need to have those warnings. What was interesting with the young man who committed suicide, his parents knew he was using ChatGPT,
Mhm.
and they thought, okay, it's okay, and they had checked it out as they should have, and said, okay, he's just using it for homework and everything else. Little did they know the trail that it was going to take, and which it did. So I think you're right. I mean, right now, no AI companions,
Yeah, it's just
etc.
no need
Yeah,
for it.
just they're a Pandora's box, and Pandora's box is already Pandora's out of the box when it comes to AI already. And parents, if you're listening to this, you're probably going, "Oh my God, one more thing, one more thing." But you're right, it is one more thing, and this is why we encourage you as parents to be the trusted adult at a start at a very young age. Anytime, like I said in the beginning, even if you give your kids a phone and they start looking at anything at a young age, teach them this is a tool, not a toy. Limit screen time and be that trusted adult and let them know there's absolutely nothing that they can encounter online or off that they can't come and talk to you about. And what's really sometimes a challenge for parents is to temper your tendency to perhaps overreact if you hear something that upsets you and disturbs you that's happened to your young child. So just build those conversations on a regular basis at an early age and continue that throughout the life of the child, because you really, even as an adult, when your kids get to be adults like Ava, and I'm sure you and your mom, have open conversations now, probably about a lot of things that you may not have thought you would have ever talked about because you learned how to do that a little
Mhm.
early on, right? So we're going to wrap. So Ava, if you can just let our listeners and viewers know how to learn more about your organization, where to find you, and where to get resources, that would be great.
Yeah, you can find us at www.theyoungpeoplesalliance.org. We are on Instagram as Young People's Alliance. We have a Facebook as Young People's Alliance. We were on Twitter and X as NCYP Alliance, so like NCYP Alliance. But we're under there as Young People's Alliance, so you can look us up there too. You can subscribe to our email list on our website, and if you are a young person or the parent of a young person who's interested in getting involved, please direct them to fill out our membership form on the website, and you can be folded into all the things that we're doing and learn advocacy and digital literacy skills galore, and come and live in DC with me and talk to legislators. It'll be fun.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ava. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being so brave and courageous. Um, just for being out there and being a voice for young people. And you're so bright and intelligent, and just God bless you, and just grateful to have you on. And so we're going to take a wrap, everybody. So thanks for joining us. And please remember to go to internetsafety101.org. You can sign up for our free newsletters and email information. We're sending information out on a weekly basis about what's happening, what you need to know to protect your kids. And please like us on your podcast link where you watch your podcast, and share this podcast as well. So thank you. Until next time, if you see someone without a smile today, give them one of yours. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.